Millionaire widower hires black maid and ends up falling in love with her. What happens next is shocking. Seeking companionship after loss, he finds solace in his new maid. Their growing closeness leads to unforeseen challenges and revelations that test societal boundaries. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. Richard Thompson sits in his dimly lit home office, his fingers tracing the edge of a silver picture frame. Inside, captured in a moment of pure joy, his wife Sarah laughs at something he had said during their last evening together. The memory plays vividly in his mind. They had prepared dinner together in their spacious kitchen, Sarah insisting on making her signature pasta dish despite feeling unusually tired. They had opened a bottle of wine, and she had made him promise to take better care of himself if anything ever happened to her. He had dismissed her concerns, thinking it was just another conversation about their future. The next morning, she didn't wake up. A brain aneurysm, the doctors said, quick and unpredictable. Now, 6 months later, Richard barely recognizes himself in the mirror. His successful technology company continues to thrive on autopilot, but his home has become a museum of memories he can't bear to change. Dishes pile up, dust collects on surfaces, and laundry remains untouched. His sister Claire's repeated suggestions to hire help echo in his mind as he stares at Sarah's smiling face in the photograph. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, Jasmine Carter helps her youngest brother with his homework while simultaneously preparing dinner for her 3 siblings. At 25, she has become the primary caregiver for her family after their mother's work accident left her unable to maintain her previous jobs. Bills pile up on their small kitchen counter, and past due notices arrive with increasing frequency. Despite the overwhelming responsibility, Jasmine maintains a quiet determination. She checks her phone between stirring the pot of budget-friendly soup and explaining math problems, scanning job listings for better opportunities. Her previous cleaning jobs barely cover their basic needs, and her dreams of attending college grow more distant with each passing month. Her siblings, aged 8 to 15, depend on her, and she refuses to let them down. The weight of their future rests heavily on her shoulders, but she keeps this burden hidden behind a gentle smile and encouraging words. The employment agency call comes unexpectedly. A wealthy client in the upscale part of town needs a full-time housekeeper. The salary offered is significantly higher than anything Jasmine has earned before. Despite her reservations about working in such an affluent environment, she accepts the interview. Walking into Richard Thompson's mansion feels like entering another world. The house, though immaculate in its architecture, shows clear signs of neglect. Richard conducts the interview in his study. His response is curt and detached. He barely makes eye contact, focusing instead on the paperwork before him. Yet something in his demeanor, a profound sadness that mirrors her own struggles, catches Jasmine's attention. As they discuss the job requirements, their eyes meet briefly. Richard notices how Jasmine's gaze lingers on Sarah's photo, not with curiosity, but with understanding. She shares a story about losing her father years ago, her voice soft but steady. For a moment, Richard's professional facade cracks, revealing a glimmer of recognition. Someone who understands the weight of loss. The tension in the room shifts from uncomfortable to something more complex. Neither can quite name it, but both feel it. A connection forged in shared pain. Richard finds himself hiring her despite his initial reservations about bringing a stranger into his private space. Jasmine accepts, seeing beyond the salary to summit. Things she hadn't expected, a chance to help someone heal while trying to rebuild her own life. As she leaves the interview, both feel an inexplicable mix of anticipation and anxiety. Neither realizes that this simple employment arrangement will challenge everything they think they know about social boundaries, healing, and the unexpected ways that love can transform lives marked by loss. The initial awkwardness between Richard and Jasmine gradually dissolves through their daily interactions. The kitchen becomes their first neutral territory. One evening, while Jasmine prepares dinner, now part of her expanded duties, Richard wanders in, drawn by the familiar scent of home cooking. He stands in the doorway, watching her efficient movements around the space that had remained largely unused since Sarah's death. "Would you like to help?" Jasmine asks without turning around, having sensed his presence. Her voice is steady, professional, but with a hint of warmth that wasn't there in their first weeks together. Richard hesitates, his hands fidgeting with his tie. In the corporate world, he commands rooms with confidence, but here, in his own kitchen, he feels strangely uncertain. "I haven't cooked since." He trails off, but Jasmine understands. She hands him a cutting board and some vegetables, giving him simple instructions. Their conversation starts awkwardly, comments about the proper way to chop onions, the weather, safe topics. Then Richard mentions a memory of Sarah teaching him to cook pasta, and instead of the usual sharp pain, he finds himself smiling slightly. During these kitchen sessions, Richard begins sharing more about his life. "The board members think I should be moving on already," he confides one evening, aggressive chopping betraying his frustration. They're concerned about public perception. A grieving CEO apparently makes shareholders nervous. He pauses, knife suspended midair. "Sometimes I wonder if they're right, if I'm holding on to grief too tightly." Jasmine listens while stirring the soup, offering the gift of silence when needed. She understands the weight of others' expectations. Over subsequent evenings, she shares fragments of her own story. Her dreams of becoming a teacher, the responsibility of raising her siblings, the constant struggle to keep their family afloat. However, she carefully edits her narrative, omitting the darker chapters of her past that she fears would change how he sees her. Their conversations deepen over weeks. Richard reveals his insecurities about being judged by society, not just for his grief, but for his growing comfort with Jasmine. "People talk," he admits one evening. "My sister Claire already made comments about how inappropriate it is to have someone so young working here. As if grief should have an acceptable timeline, and healing should follow their prescribed methods." Jasmine understands these unspoken social boundaries all too well. She's noticed the looks from neighbors when she arrives for work, the assumptions made about her character based solely on her position and background. She wants to tell Richard about her own battles with social prejudice, about the obstacles she's faced, but fear holds her back. Instead, she channels her energy into her work and their growing friendship. One rainy evening, while music plays softly from the kitchen radio, Jasmine catches Richard absently swaying to the rhythm while drying dishes. Without thinking, she takes his hand, attempting to show him a proper dance step. His initial stiffness melts into laughter as he stumbles, trying to follow her lead. The sound of his genuine laughter echoes through the kitchen, the first real laugh since Sarah's death. The moment shifts something between them. The formal barriers of employer and employee blur into something less defined, but more authentic. They're no longer just two people occupying the same space. They're two souls recognizing something familiar in each other. Rick Hart finds himself looking forward to their evening conversations, planning to arrive home earlier to join her in the kitchen. Jasmine begins bringing books she's reading, sharing her thoughts on literature and education, revealing the depth of her intellect and aspirations. The kitchen becomes their sanctuary, a space where social expectations and past traumas temporarily fade into the background. Yet beneath this growing comfort, both harbor fears. Richard worries about what his social circle would think of his increasing attachment to his housekeeper. Jasmine guards her secrets, knowing that her past could shatter this fragile connection they've built. The weight of unspoken words hangs between them, even as their friendship deepens. Claire Thompson's unexpected visit disrupts the delicate balance Richard and Jasmine have established. She arrives on a Sunday afternoon, her designer handbag swinging purposefully as she strides through the front door without waiting for an invitation. The house's transformation stops her in her tracks. Gone are the dust and neglect, replaced by fresh flowers and the smell of baking bread. Jasmine is in the kitchen, preparing Sunday dinner, something that has become a routine without either her or Richard consciously acknowledging it. Claire watches through narrowed eyes as her brother enters the kitchen, comfortable and relaxed, picking up a dish towel to help with the dishes as if it's the most natural thing in the world. "Richard, we need to talk," Claire announces, her voice cutting through the domestic scene. Privately, The emphasis on the last word makes Jasmine flinch slightly, though she maintains her composure. As she exits the kitchen, she catches fragments of Claire's harsh whispers. "Have you lost your mind?" Claire's voice rises despite her attempt at discretion. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" The wealthy widower and his young housekeeper. It's like something out of a cheap novel. Richard's response is too low to hear, but Claire continues relentlessly. "The board members are talking. Your shareholders are concerned about your judgment." Jasmine moves further away, her hands trembling as she straightens already perfect cushions in the living room. But Claire's next words freeze her in place. "I did some digging, Richard. Did you even bother to run a proper background check on her? Do you know about her connection to Marcus Davidson? About the restraining order? The police reports?" The sound of something shattering comes from the kitchen. Richard has dropped a glass. Jasmine's past, the one she's tried so hard to escape, crashes into her present with the same devastating force. Her carefully constructed new life seems to crack like that broken glass. "She's not who you think she is." Claire's voice drops to a deadly serious tone. "She's not some innocent girl looking for a fresh start. She has a history, Richard, a history that could destroy everything you've built if this gets out. What would Sarah think of you letting someone like that into her home?" The mention of Sarah's name hits both Richard and Jasmine like a physical blow. Jasmine retreats to the laundry room, her safe space in the house, trying to steady her breathing. The memories she's fought so hard to suppress come flooding back. Marcus's manipulation, the escalating abuse, the night she finally found the courage to run, the system that failed to protect her, the shame of having to move cities to escape his influence. In the kitchen, Richard struggles to process this information. The Jasmine he knows, gentle, hardworking, intelligent, seems incompatible with Claire's accusations. Yet doubt creeps in, poisonous and persistent. Has he been naive? Has grief made him an easy target? "She's using you, Richard," Claire presses her advantage. "A man in your position, wealthy, vulnerable, recently widowed. It's the perfect opportunity for someone with her background to take advantage. You need to let her go before this becomes a scandal." Jasmine, unable to bear more, silently gathers her things. The weight of her past threatens to crush her carefully rebuilt self-worth. Every doubt, every insecurity she's battled rushes back. She's worked so hard to become someone new, someone worthy of respect and trust. But perhaps Claire is right. Perhaps people like her don't get second chances. As she slips out the back door, she hears Richard's voice finally rise in anger, defending her to his sister. But it's too late. The safe space they've created together has been shattered by the intrusion of reality. Their different worlds, their social gaps, and most devastatingly, her unspoken past. Richard faces his sister with growing anger, his hands gripping the kitchen counter. "You had no right to investigate her, Claire. No right to dig into her private life." His voice trembles with barely contained emotion, but Claire remains unmoved, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. "Someone had to protect you since you're clearly not thinking clearly," Claire retorts. "You're acting like a lovesick teenager instead of the CEO of a major technology company. Do you have any idea what this could do to our family's reputation?" She pulls up several documents on her phone, thrusting them toward Richard. "Police reports, Richard. Multiple incidents. Is this really the kind of person you want in your life?" Richard pushes the phone away, his jaw clenched. "The woman I know is kind, intelligent, and has shown more genuine care for my well-being than anyone else since Sarah died. Including you, Claire." The words hit their mark. Claire's composed facade cracks slightly. "I love her," he continues, the admission surprising even himself. "And I don't care what you or anyone else thinks about that." Meanwhile, Jasmine has retreated to her small apartment, her siblings immediately sensing something is wrong when she returns home early. She moves mechanically through their evening routine, helping with homework and preparing dinner, all while her mind races. Every kind word, every gentle moment shared with Richard now feels tainted by her undisclosed past. Late that evening, her phone buzzes with messages from Richard. "Please come back. We need to talk. Whatever Claire said, it doesn't matter. Let me understand." She reads each one with tears streaming down her face, but doesn't respond. Instead, she drafts a formal resignation letter, her hands shaking as she types. The next morning, she arrives early at the mansion, intending to leave the letter and collect her things before Richard wakes. But he's waiting for her, having barely slept. "Don't do this," he says as soon as she enters. "Don't let Claire drive you away." Jasmine keeps her distance, standing near the door. "Your sister is right about one thing," she says quietly. "I'm not who you think I am. You deserve someone better, someone without my kind of baggage." Her voice breaks slightly. "Someone your family will accept." Richard moves toward her, but she steps back. "I don't care about your past," he insists. "Whatever happened, whatever you're running from, it doesn't change who you are now." He reaches for her hand, but she pulls away. "But it does," Jasmine responds, her professional mask slipping back into place like armor. "You're Richard Thompson. Your decisions affect more than just yourself. Your company, your employees, your family's legacy. I can't be the reason all of that gets compromised." She places the resignation letter on the hallway table. "I've arranged for another housekeeper through the agency. She'll start next week." Her voice is steady, but her hands tremble. "Someone more appropriate." Richard's frustration builds. "Stop making decisions for me. I'm capable of choosing who I want in my life." He runs his hands through his hair in exasperation. "Sarah would have loved you, you know. She would have seen what I see. Someone strong, caring, determined." The mention of Sarah breaks something in Jasmine. "Please don't," she whispers. "Don't make this harder than it already is." She turns toward the door, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "You gave me dignity when I worked here, Mr. Thompson. Please respect my decision to leave." The formal use of his surname hits Richard like a physical blow. He watches helplessly as she walks out, taking with her all the warmth and life that had slowly returned to his home. The kitchen, their sanctuary of shared moments and laughter, feels suddenly cold and empty. As Jasmine walks down the long driveway for the last time, each step feels heavier than the last. Behind her, she leaves not just a job, but a glimpse of what might have been, a life where her past didn't define her future, where love could bridge social divides. But reality, she reminds herself, rarely matches dreams. Days after leaving the Thompson mansion, Jasmine finds herself sitting at a small coffee shop, attempting to focus on job listings on her laptop. The bell above the door chimes, and a familiar voice cuts through the ambient noise, freezing her in place. "Hello, Jazz. Long time no see." Marcus Davidson stands before her table, looking exactly as she remembers. Charming smile, expensive clothes, and eyes that never quite match his pleasant expression. Her coffee cup rattles slightly against its saucer as she sets it down. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" Her voice remains steady, though her heart races. "Can a guy check up on an old flame?" He slides uninvited into the seat across from her, especially when he hears she's been getting cozy with Richard Thompson. His casual tone carries an undercurrent of threat that Jasmine recognizes all too well. That's quite a step up from cleaning houses, isn't it? Jasmine's fingers hover over her phone, muscle memory from years of anxiety. "I worked for him, she corrects herself. "That's all." She starts gathering her things, but Marcus's hand shoots out, gripping her wrist just tight enough to make a point. "We both know you're smarter than that, Jazz," he says, his voice dropping lower. A wealthy widower, vulnerable and lonely, must have seemed like the perfect opportunity. His grip tightens slightly. "But you're forgetting something. I know the real you. The scared little girl playing dress-up, pretending she belongs in their world." Memories flood back. The gradual isolation from friends and family, the subtle put-downs that became outright cruelty, the way he convinced her that every problem was her fault. "Let go of me," she says firmly, drawing strength from the person she's become. "That scared girl grew up, Marcus. She learned to recognize men like you." He releases her wrist but doesn't move. "I've changed, Jazz. Been through therapy, got my act together. I miss us." His voice softens, using the tone that used to make her doubt herself. "We could try again. I could help you through this rough patch." Jasmine feels the familiar pull of his manipulation, the way he always knew how to catch her when she felt most vulnerable. But something's different now. Memories of evenings in Richard's kitchen flash through her mind. Conversations where she felt heard, respected, valued for her thoughts and dreams rather than her usefulness. "There is no us, Marcus," she says, standing up. "There never really was. There was just you, controlling every aspect of my life, and me, too afraid to leave." Her voice trembles but grows stronger. "I'm not afraid anymore." As she turns to leave, Marcus calls after her. "Does Thompson know everything about us? About that night? About what you did?" The questions hit their mark, making her stumble slightly. "Think he'd still want you if he knew the whole truth." Meanwhile, across town, Richard sits in his office, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. An email from his private investigator sits open, containing details about Jasmine's past, specifically about her relationship with Marcus Davidson. The report paints a picture of systematic abuse, restraining orders, and one violent night that changed everything. The final paragraphs detail how Marcus had attacked Jasmine, how she had defended herself, how charges were filed but later dropped. The clinical language can't hide the horror of what she endured or the strength it took to escape. Richard's hands clench in a fist as he reads, understanding now why Jasmine guards her past so carefully. His phone buzzes, a text from Claire. "Saw your ex-housekeeper having coffee with Marcus Davidson. Thought you should know." Attached is a photo taken through the coffee shop window, showing Marcus gripping Jasmine's wrist. Richard's blood runs cold, all his protective instincts surging to the surface. But doubt creeps in. If Jasmine is meeting with Marcus, does that mean Claire was right about her? Has he misread everything? The thought of Jasmine reconnecting with her abuser makes him feel physically ill, but he forces himself to consider all possibilities. The weight of uncertainty crushes against his chest, mixing with the pain of what feels like another betrayal. At his office, Richard stares through floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline, barely registering the concerned glances from his executive assistant. The photo of Jasmine and Marcus haunts him. His friend David, a fellow CEO, sits across from him, watching Richard swirl his untouched coffee. "You're not really here today, are you?" David asks, breaking the silence. Richard finally looks up, exhaustion evident in his features. Without preamble, he shares everything about Jasmine, their growing connection, Claire's interference, and now Marcus's reappearance. "The board would have a field day with this," Richard admits, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "CEO falls for housekeeper with a complicated past. It's like I'm deliberately giving them ammunition." He pauses, his voice softening. "But when I'm with her, none of that matters. She sees me, David. Not the grieving widower, not the CEO, just me." David leans forward, his expression serious. "You know what I see? For the first time since Sarah's death, you're talking about something other than work. You're feeling something." He gestures at the office around them. "All this? It's just structure we created to feel in control. But real life, real love, it's messy. It doesn't fit in spreadsheets." Across town, Jasmine sits in her family's small living room, her mother Rosa watching her from her wheelchair. The encounter with Marcus has left her shaken, but something else has changed. The fear that once paralyzed her has been replaced by anger, not just at Marcus, but at herself for letting others define her worth. "I can't keep running, Mama," she says softly in Spanish. "Every time I start to build something good, I let my past chase me away." She looks at her hands, remembering how they felt preparing meals with Richard, the simple dignity of creating something together. Rosa wheels closer, taking her daughter's hands. "Mi amor, you've spent so long taking care of everyone else, your siblings, me, even that rich man and his empty house. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself." She squeezes Jasmine's hands. "Your father didn't raise a coward. He raised a fighter." Jasmine's eyes fill with tears at the mention of her father. "But what do I have to offer someone like Richard? Claire was right. I'm just the help." The words taste bitter in her mouth. "Is that what you really believe?" Rosa challenges. "The woman who put herself through night school while working 2 jobs? Who kept this family together when I couldn't? Who survived what that monster Marcus did?" She touches Jasmine's cheek gently. "You are not just anything, Mihija." Later that evening, Jasmine pulls out her old notebooks, dreams and plans she'd pushed aside when survival took priority. Her acceptance letter T. Oh, the local community college's teaching program. Deferred when her mother's accident required her to become the family's provider. Pages of lesson plans she created, imagining herself in front of a classroom. She begins to write, pouring out her thoughts. Not just about Richard, but about who she is and who she wants to become. The woman who left the Thompson mansion in shame isn't the same one writing these words. That woman let fear of judgment control her choices. This one is ready to fight. At his home, Richard wanders into the kitchen, the space still holding echoes of Jasmine's presence. He opens a drawer and finds one of her recipe cards, her neat handwriting detailing instructions for his favorite dish. It hits him then. He's not just missing the comfort she brought to his home. He's missing her strength, her dedication, her quiet wisdom. He thinks about Sarah, about what she would say. She always believed in looking beyond surfaces, in finding the truth in people's actions rather than their circumstances. Jasmine brought life back to his home not through grand gestures, but through consistent care, through treating his grief with respect while gently encouraging him to live again. The question isn't whether he loves her. He does with a certainty that surprises him. The question is whether he's brave enough to fight for that love, to face the disapproval of his social circle, the potential business implications, and most importantly, to prove to Jasmine that she's worth fighting for. Richard stands before his board of directors, his posture confident despite their skeptical expressions. The Thompson Foundation's annual charity gala will focus on domestic violence survivors and educational opportunities this year, he announces, ignoring the raised eyebrows. We'll be partnering with local organizations that help survivors rebuild their lives through education and career development. The boardroom buzzes with whispered conversations. Richard continues, outlining his vision for an event that will challenge social prejudices while supporting genuine change. He doesn't mention Jasmine, but she's at the heart of every word. This isn't just about making a statement. It's about creating a platform where stories like hers can be heard. Meanwhile, Jasmine receives an unexpected call from David, Richard's friend. He misses you, David says without preamble. And he's planning something big. He needs your help. He explains about the gala, emphasizing its focus on survivor advocacy and educational empowerment. Jasmine's initial reaction is fear. The thought of facing Richard's social circle, of potentially encountering Marcus, makes her stomach churn. But something in David's voice and the nature of the event itself makes her pause. Why me? She asks finally. Because you understand both sides, David replies. You've lived it. And because Richard trusts you to help make this more than just another rich people's party pretending to care about social causes. After careful consideration, Jasmine agrees to meet with Richard to discuss the event. Their reunion in his office is charged with unspoken emotions. Richard looks tired but determined. Jasmine appears more confident, dressed professionally, no longer in her housekeeper's clothes. I want you to help coordinate the Survivor Stories segment, Richard explains, maintaining professional distance despite his urge to close the gap between them. These voices need to be heard by people who can make real changes in policy and funding. During the planning sessions, they work side by side, their former intimacy gradually resurfacing in small moments. A shared glance, a brief touch while passing documents, the way they still anticipate each other's thoughts. Richard notices how Jasmine has grown more assertive, confidently challenging suggestions that feel superficial or patronizing. One evening, as they review potential speakers, Richard finally breaks their profession. Al-Fasad, I know about Marcus, he says quietly. About everything. Jasmine freezes, but he continues. I understand now why you left. But I need you to understand something too. I'm not afraid of your past. I'm in awe of your strength. Jasmine's eyes fill with tears, but she blinks them back. I couldn't bear it if you looked at me with pity, she admits. Or if people thought I was using my story to manipulate you. Richard moves closer, his hand finding hers. Then let's show them who you really are. Not a victim, not a housekeeper, but a survivor who's helping others find their voice. The warmth of his hand grounds her, reminds her of all the quiet moments they shared in his kitchen. As they work late into the night, they share more honest conversations about their fears and hopes. Richard confesses his initial uncertainty about moving on after Sarah, about the guilt that still sometimes plagues him. Jasmine talks about her dreams of finishing her education, of becoming someone who can help others escape situations like she did. The gala preparations become a symbol of their own transformation. Each decision they make together reflects their growing understanding that love doesn't erase the past. It provides the strength to face it. Richard watches Jasmine blossom into her role, her natural leadership abilities emerging as she works with survivors and organizations. But beneath their renewed connection, both harbor anxieties about the upcoming event. Richard knows his sister, and certain board members still oppose his choices. Jasmine worries about facing society's judgment, and neither can shake the feeling that Marcus's reappearance has set something in motion that might explode at any moment. The Thompson Foundation's annual gala transforms the city's grand ballroom into an elegant space where wealth meets social consciousness. Educational and survivor support organizations have set up tasteful displays around the periphery. The guest list includes the city's elite, media personalities, and advocates for survivor support programs. Richard adjusts his bow, tying nervously backstage. The event represents more than just a charity function. It's his public declaration of support for Jasmine and everything she represents. He watches her from across the room as she directs volunteers, her burgundy evening gown making her look every bit as elegant as any socialite present. Claire arrives early, her expression tight with disapproval. "You're making a mistake," she warns Richard. "This whole event screams personal agenda. The board is already questioning your judgment." She surveys the room with critical eyes. "And parading her around like this? It's transparent, Richard." "Good," Richard responds firmly. "I want to be transparent. These stories deserve to be heard, Claire. These survivors deserve to be seen as more than their past traumas." His sister's face softens slightly at his passion, but her concern remains evident. The event begins smoothly. Richard delivers his opening speech, emphasizing the importance of breaking social barriers and supporting second chances. The audience responds with polite applause, though whispers circulate as some recognize Jasmine among the event coordinators. Jasmine takes the stage to introduce the survivor speaker segment. Her voice, initially quiet, grows stronger as she speaks about resilience and the importance of education in rebuilding lives. The audience, despite their initial skepticism, finds themselves drawn in by her authentic passion. Then Claire spots something that makes her pale. Marcus Davidson has somehow gained entry to the event, lingering near the bar with a calculating smile. She moves quickly toward Richard, but it's too late. Marcus is already approaching the stage. "Beautiful speech, Jazz," his voice carries across the now silent room. "Always a performer, weren't you? Always knowing exactly what story to tell to get what you want." His words slur slightly, saying he's been drinking. Richard starts forward, but Jasmine raises a hand to stop him. The room holds its collective breath as she faces her abuser. "This event isn't about me, Marcus," she states clearly into the microphone. "It's about every person who's ever felt trapped by their circumstances or someone else's control." Marcus laughs bitterly. "Is that what you told Thompson? Did you tell him how you played the victim with me too?" "How you?" Claire interrupts, attempting to have security remove him, but he shrugs them off. The tension in the room becomes unbearable. Several guests start to leave, muttering about scandal and impropriety. Richard watches helplessly as his carefully planned event seems to unravel. But then something unexpected happens. One of the survivor speakers, an elegant older woman who serves as a judge, stands up. "Mr. Davidson," she announces clearly, "I don't know your history with Ms. Carter, but I recognize the tactics you're using. They're the same ones my ex-husband used for years. Public humiliation, character assassination, attempting to undermine success." Other voices join in, creating a shield of support around Jasmine. Each shared story builds a wall against Marcus's attempts to shame her. But it's Claire's unexpected intervention that silences him completely. "I was wrong about you," she says to Jasmine, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I saw what I expected to see, someone taking advantage of my brother's vulnerability. But watching you build this event, seeing how you've helped others find their voice, I was wrong." Marcus, finding his audience turning against him, makes one final attempt to salvage his attack. "She's not the angel you all think she is," he spits out. "Ask her about the night she..." But Jasmine cuts him off, her voice steady and clear. "The night I finally fought back? The night I stopped being afraid? Yes, let's talk about that night, Marcus. Let's talk about how the system failed not just me, but countless others like me." The room falls silent. Every eye on Jasmine as she continues to speak, no longer just to Marcus, but to everyone present. Years of suppressed truth pour out, not in shame, but in strength. The ballroom's elegant atmosphere crackles with tension as Jasmine continues speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. "That night, Marcus broke into my apartment after I'd finally left him. He'd been drinking, just like tonight." Her eyes meet his, unwavering. "He said he'd rather see me dead than free." The audience remains completely silent, society's usual masks of polite indifference stripped away by the raw truth of her words. Richard stands frozen, his heart pounding as he finally hears the full story that's haunted Jasmine for so long. "I defended myself," Jasmine continues, her hands steady on the podium. "With a kitchen knife I kept by my bed because I was so afraid. When he lunged at me, She pauses, taking a deep breath. "I stabbed him. Not fatally, but enough to stop him. The charges were dropped as self-defense, but the shame he made me feel for protecting myself, that took longer to heal." Marcus's face contorts with rage. "You ruined my life," he shouts, lunging forward. Security moves to intercept him, but Richard reaches him first, positioning himself between Marcus and the stage. "No, Marcus," Richard's voice cuts through the chaos. "You ruined your own life, and you almost ruined hers. But look at her now. Look at what she's built despite everything you did to break her." His voice trembles with controlled anger. "I love her, not despite her past, but because of who she became in spite of it." The declaration hangs in the air. Claire watches her brother, seeing not the grieving widower, but a man fully alive again, fighting for something he believes in. She steps forward, adding her voice to his. "The Thompson Foundation stands behind survivors," she announces, surprising everyone. "All survivors, regardless of their social status or background." But the night's revelations aren't over. Marcus, desperate and cornered, pulls out his final weapon. "Did you tell them everything, Jazz? About the baby we lost? About how you..." His words hit Jasmine like physical blows, exposing the deepest wound she's carried. The room collectively inhales. Richard's eyes find Jasmine's, seeing the pain she's hidden for so long. She grips the podium tighter, tears streaming down her face, but her voice remains steady as she responds. "Yes, I lost a baby," she acknowledges, her words echoing in the silent room. "After one of your disciplinary sessions. I was 8 weeks pregnant, and you knew it when you pushed me down those stairs." The truth lands like a thunderbolt, stripping away any sympathy Marcus might have garnered. Richard feels physical pain hearing this, understanding now the full depth of her trauma. But he also sees her strength, the way she stands tall, refusing to let her past define her future. The woman before him isn't broken. She's forged by fire into something unbreakable. The other survivors in the room move closer to the stage, forming a physical barrier between Jasmine and Marcus. It's a powerful image. Women of all social classes, backgrounds, and experiences, united in support of one of their own. Marcus, his last weapon spent, finally crumbles. Security leads him away as he shouts incoherently about lies and betrayal. But his words no longer have power here. The truth, in all its painful clarity, has set Jasmine free. Richard climbs the steps to the stage, standing beside Jasmine. The audience watches as he takes her hand, a simple gesture that defies every social boundary in the room. Claire joins them, completing a picture of unity that no one expected at the beginning of the evening. The gala's dramatic events make headlines, but not in the way anyone expected. Thompson Foundation revolutionizes survivor support, reads one headline. Love breaks social barriers. A modern tale of courage, declares another. The story captures public imagination not as scandal, but as inspiration. Richard stands before his board of directors a week later, his posture relaxed despite the gravity of the moment. "I'm prepared to step down if that's what you feel is necessary," he states calmly. "But before you decide, let me show you something." He presents the statistics. Donations to the foundation have tripled since the gala. Companies are reaching out about implementing survivor support programs. Universities are offering scholarships for survivors seeking education. What began as potential scandal has transformed into a movement. More importantly, he continues, pulling out a chair for someone waiting outside, "I want you to meet the woman who made this possible." Jasmine enters, dressed professionally, carrying a portfolio. For the next hour, she presents her vision for the foundation's future: programs combining survivor support with educational opportunities, mentorship initiatives, and corporate partnerships. The board members exchange glances as she speaks. Her presentation is flawless, her passion evident, her intelligence undeniable. They see not a former housekeeper, but a woman whose experience and vision could transform their organization. Then comes the unexpected twist. An elderly board member, Mr. Harrison, clears his throat. "My daughter," he says quietly, "never told anyone about her abusive marriage. She died still keeping that secret." The room falls silent. Maybe if there had been someone like Ms. Carter speaking out, showing there's no shame in survival, things would have been different. One by one, similar stories emerge. Behind the polished facades of wealth and privilege, domestic violence and trauma had touched many lives in that room. The walls of social class begin to crumble in the face of shared human experience. Later that evening, in Richard's kitchen, Jasmine and Richard cook dinner together. The simple domestic scene carries deeper meaning now. "The board offered me a position," she tells him, stirring the sauce. "Director of Survivor Advocacy and Educational Initiatives." Richard smiles, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "They'd be fools not to. Though I must admit, I'll miss your cooking." She laughs, the sound free and uninhibited. They both know she hasn't really been his housekeeper for a long time. Claire arrives for dinner, something that's become a regular occurrence. She brings college brochures. The local university offers night classes. "If you're going to be a Thompson," she tells Jasmine with a wink, "you might as well have the degree to go with it." The transformative power of their love story extends beyond their personal happiness. The foundation becomes a pioneer in survivor support programs. Jasmine's story inspires others to speak out, to reclaim their power. Richard's willingness to challenge social norms encourages other business leaders to examine their prejudices. As they sit down to dinner, now a family of choice rather than convention, Richard raises his glass. "To Sarah," he says softly, "who taught me that love doesn't follow rules." Jasmine squeezes his hand, adding, "and to second chances." Outside, reporters still occasionally gather, hoping to capture photos of the unlikely couple. But inside this home, love has created its own reality. One where social barriers mean nothing, where past trauma becomes strength, and where healing happens in the simple act of cooking dinner together. The fairy tale ending isn't about a wealthy man saving a poor woman, or a caring woman healing a grieving widower. It's about two people brave enough to be their authentic selves, choosing love over society's expectations, and in doing so, changing not just their own lives but the lives of countless others. Through their journey, they've proven that true love isn't about erasing the past or forgetting what was lost. It's about building something new from the pieces of broken dreams, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about recognizing that sometimes the greatest acts of love are simply believing in someone when the world tells you not to.